Hello there, this is Welsh ASMR 82. Hey, how you doing? So, you kind of loved the first video I did with this book, and lots of comments said, please do another one. So, here we are. I do listen to you and I do read your comments. I do respond to as absolutely many as I can. So thank you so much for leaving a comment. I did think that I would possibly get in trouble if I just looked through the entire book. So we got this far last time, and I think in hindsight I'm going to skip so I don't get in too much trouble just giving the entire book away. I highly recommend the purchase. I did actually buy this for myself and a friend at the same time. I bought it for his birthday and I got a copy for myself. So, highly recommend it. Let's, oh god, do I want to start? I suppose I could. Maybe I should do a different one first. Oh yeah, okay, that one's interesting. I was looking at this on a map the other day. Oh, this is another very interesting one. Okay, we'll start with that one. Okay, so hit the hell out of that like button for me. Leave me a comment. And disagree with any of the information and try and correct it. I'm just reading out somebody else's work here. If you think you know better, please put it in a comment as well. Okay, so a region of the world I'm personally really interested in is Central Asia, which is where Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan again because it floats around, and Tajikistan are just above Afghanistan. And just over here a little bit would be Turkmenistan. So these are enclaves in Central Asia. 100,000 people were separated from their homes, from their home countries by the dissolution of a nation. I expect this is going to be talking about the USSR, which left a lot of strange borders behind it. That was the exact middle of the book. Okay, sit back and relax, headphones in, eyes closed, chill out and enjoy. Within many countries there are internal enclaves, parts of individual provinces, states or federal states within other such areas. As long as a country is united, these internal enclaves do not represent a significant problem. However, if such a country breaks up, the internal enclaves become true enclaves with all the difficulties this creates. This was the case with the breakup of the USSR and the proclamations of independence of its Central Asian republics. During the Soviet Union, the borders of its republics were defined by the leaders of the Communist Party, who decided that the borders in Central Asia should be determined, to a large extent, along linguistic lines. So, in theory, a village in which language X is spoken should belong to Republic X, even if it is surrounded by Republic Y. During the USSR, this did not present a problem, but today there are several enclaves within the independent Central Asian countries of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Between them they are inhabited by almost 100,000 people. Most of the enclaves are in Kyrgyzstan, the westernmost enclave, Kairagach, or Kairagach, Western Al-Atra, with an area of less than 1 square kilometre, belongs to Tajikistan. It is uncertain whether this enclave is inhabited at all. Another enclave of Tajikistan in Kyrgyzstan is Vorukh. This is a relatively large and populated enclave. Almost 100 square kilometres and 17 villages, with a total of over 25,000 inhabitants, of whom 95% are Tajik. The largest Uzbekistan enclave is Soch, or Sur, with an area of over 230 square kilometres, a width varying between 3 and 13 kilometres, and a length of 35 kilometres. One of Kyrgyzstan's main motorways passes through this enclave, whose 43,000, or according to some sources over 70,000 inhabitants, are almost exclusively Tajik. It would appear that, of all the Central Asian enclaves, this is the only one with some sort of local parliament. The other enclaves are organised as ordinary villages without separate state bodies. Another relatively large Uzbek enclave is Shahi Mardan, located approximately 20 kilometers south of the Uzbek border. A population of 6,000, of which over 90% are Uzbek, lives in this territory of about 40 square kilometers. Chonkara, or Chonkora, is a small Uzbek enclave just north of Soch. It consists of 2 Uzbek villages, with an area of about 3 square kilometers, and is about 3 kilometers from the Uzbekistan border. Changail is a small Uzbek enclave, about 1 kilometer long and a kilometer from the Uzbek border. It is unclear whether this enclave still exists, even though it is still marked on some maps. Uzbekistan is home to the 2 remaining enclaves. Sarvan is located about 100 kilometers east of Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. This Tajikistan enclave is about 1.5 kilometers from its home country, with an area of 8 square kilometers and less than 500 inhabitants. Although Tajikistan claims that it governs this enclave, this does not seem to be true according to various sources. It appears that all the power has been in the hands of Uzbekistan since at least the beginning of this century, so it is debatable whether this still exists as an enclave at all. Barak is a Kyrgyzstan enclave in Uzbekistan. Or maybe not. Another confusing enclave in Central Asia. According to some sources, this small enclave is located a few kilometers north of the Kyrgyzstan-Uzbek border, near the city of Osh. Other sources claim that it is not an enclave, or at least not anymore, but a Kyrgyzstan border village. Obviously, the situation with enclaves in Central Asia, or more precisely in the Fergana Valley, is very confusing. The 3 countries are attempting to finally define their borders, which may result in the elimination of some of these enclaves, or they're merging with their home countries, or one never knows. Perhaps the talks will result in some new enclaves and borders. Okay, I was literally looking at this the other day, so this is very interesting. Then we'll go into the Middle East now. You can see the Gulf of Oman. And the United Arab Emirates, or Dubai, is just over there. The nationalities of these enclaves were chosen by their inhabitants. These are particularly strange. This is to do with Oman and the UAE, Mada and Nahwa. The reason I find this one particularly strange is that Oman, which is just down there, claims this bit, or not claims, is this bit. But then, within it, is an area of the UAE. So the UAE is this, and this, separated by Oman. So there's a part of the UAE which is completely surrounded by Oman, and a part of Oman which is completely surrounded by the UAE. So strange. And then it's a whole of Akan. I wonder if that's involved. No, that's just water. And it carries on up further up there. There's another very similar one up here. The Arabian Peninsula is a vast peninsula in southwest Asia, rich in oil and gas. Since desert covers the greater part of this peninsula, the borders between the countries within it have, to a large extent, yet to be clearly defined. This is particularly the case with the borders between Saudi Arabia and its southern and southeastern neighbours Yemen, Oman and the UAE. Even within the borders on the Arabian Peninsula that are relatively clearly defined, there is still an oddity in one of them. The Oman enclave within the UAE contains the small town of Madha, which in turn contains the UAE counter-enclave of the village of Nahwa. Madha, covering 75 square kilometres and with about 3,000 inhabitants, is quite a large enclave. Most of it is uninhabited, except for several small scattered villages in the small town of the same name, also known as New Madha, on the eastern side of the enclave. This small town possesses all that is necessary for regular life, including a police station, a school, banks, power and water supply, and even an airport. Less than 10 kilometres west of Madha, along a good but winding road, lies the UAE counter-enclave of Nahwa. This enclave consists of two small towns, the very rich New Nahwa, with about 40 houses, a police station, its own clinic, and ordered streets, and the poor, haphazard and unpaved streets of Old Nahwa. The unusual situation with this enclave and counter-enclave involved from a democratic decision made by the local tribes during the period between the two world wars, when some tribes opted to become annexed to Oman and some to the UAE. The acceptance of their referendum decision resulted in these borders. Here we go. North of these two territories there is another small Omani pen enclave, semi-enclave, separated from the home country by the land of the UAE and the waters of the Oman Bay. It is the extremely rugged coastline of the Musandam Peninsula, which strategically controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/3 of the world's oil tankers pass. This area is home to the Kumzari language, the only language from the Iranian group that is spoken on the Arabian Peninsula. Interesting. The high mountains and magnificent fjords of the Musandam Peninsula represent a contrast to the mostly flat, sweeping coastline of the Arabian Peninsula. I read a really interesting article on the current political situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and while afterwards I went on Google Maps and looked at these enclaves. Obviously I wouldn't have talked about this a couple of months ago, but there's been some sort of resolution. I'm going to put it in because people are, it's a bit difficult. We'll see what the article says, and then I'll add to it if I need to. I know about this region quite a lot. So let me just highlight something. This is Armenia, this is Georgia, Russia is just north. Turkey is here, and this is Iran. Okay, so this is the Caucasus. Azerbaijan is here, but then also here, split with Armenia here. And then this area is Nagorno-Karabakh in Russian and Karabakh in Azerbaijani. Dalik Karabakh, I think it says. And I believe it's called Artsakh in Armenian. It's quite controversial for two reasons. One, it was, up until 6 months ago, since the breakup of the USSR, inhabited by ethnic Armenians who sort of declared independence as Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, which wasn't recognized, I don't think, even by Armenia, but certainly not Azerbaijan. And actually Armenia and Azerbaijan went to war. This is very rough history. This is just me not getting facts and figures right, but this is a brief summary. And as a result, Nakhchivan, which is part of Azerbaijan, was completely separated by this part of Armenia here. And of course, like we talked about earlier on, when this was all part of the USSR, it didn't really matter. So 6 months ago, Azerbaijan, after years of fighting Armenia, did the sort of, I think it was described as a flash, something rather like a flash invasion, or, although they will argue that they can't invade their own country, but they sent their troops in overnight, and most of the population fled to Armenia, particularly to Yerevan, the capital, where they are politically asylum seekers because they don't own Armenian passports. So they don't really have the right to work, and they want to go back. And I believe it's NATO, or one of those councils, has stated that technically it was ethnic cleansing because an entire ethnicity was sent away so that Azerbaijan could have this region back in their full control. So there's still ongoing talks about whether they'll be able to go back to their houses, but now they'll be Azerbaijani citizens. And the second article I read, and of course write me a comment if you think that that's too crude. The second article I read explained that this area here there's negotiations going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Now they're trying to have more friendly relations to basically provide a railway network that goes along the border here, because this is a mountainous valley, but there's enough space to get a railway track here, so the people living here in Azerbaijan can go to Azerbaijan without crossing through Armenian territory. Plus, I think I read that that would mean that an oil pipe could come through Azerbaijan and get to Turkey and the rest of Europe, which it can't currently because Armenia was blocking its way. So let's see what the article says. This is my understanding of the situation in there. Complicated borders and an unwillingness to compromise create excellent sources for misunderstandings, conflicts and even wars. Such a situation occurred on the southern slopes of the Caucasus Mountains following the dissolution of the USSR. Centuries of tension between Christian Armenia and Muslim Azerbaijan were exacerbated by the establishment of the autonomous provinces and enclaves during the time of the Soviet Union, and even more so with the declaration of independence from the former Soviet republics. As the former republics became independent during the dissolution of the USSR, so some of the autonomous provinces also sought the freedom to decide their own futures. Such was the case with Nagorno-Karabakh, an autonomous region within Azerbaijan, populated almost exclusively by Armenians. Following the independence of Armenia and Azerbaijan in 1991, Nagorno-Karabakh declared its independence as the Republic of Artsakh. This led to a bloody war over the region between the newly declared republic, supported by Armenia, and Azerbaijan. This conflict ended with the truce of 1994, with the Republic of Artsakh in control of the former autonomous region, and also much of the surrounding area up to the Armenian and Iranian borders. The truce, with occasional interruptions, lasted until late 2020 when war erupted again. This war came to an end following a Russian-brokered deal, under which Azerbaijan regained control of much of the Republic of Artsakh, including part of the former autonomous region itself. The situation of the Soviet republics of Armenia and Azerbaijan was already complicated enough. Within its borders, Azerbaijan had the autonomous Armenian region of Nagorno-Karabakh and one Armenian enclave. As well as its own exclave, on the other hand, Armenia had 3 Azerbaijani enclaves. Artsvashen, the Eagle City, was an Armenian small-town enclave in the northwest of Azerbaijan. It covered an area of about 40 square kilometers, although this town, according to the documents, still belongs to Armenia. It has been exclusively populated by Azerbaijani refugees from other regions since the Armenian-Azerbaijani War in the early 90s. Azerbaijan has another large exclave south of Armenia and north of Iran named Nakhchivan. After the First World War and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the USSR occupied the entire area south of the Caucasus Mountains. Nakhchivan became part of Azerbaijan, although it was populated mainly by Armenians until the 19th century and the genocide over this nation. Today, Nakhchivan has the status of an autonomous republic within Azerbaijan and still suffers the consequences of conflicts and closed borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As Nakhchivan borders with Armenia, Iran and Turkey, it is not a true enclave. Interesting. It is interesting to note that Nakhchivan, the Azerbaijani exclave, has its own exclave within Armenia. Until the War of the 90s, Karki was an enclave covering an area of about 20 square kilometers and populated by Azerbaijanis. Nowadays also known as Tigranashen, it is a village populated by Armenians, many of whom are refugees from Azerbaijan. The majority of the former Karki inhabitants moved to Nakhchivan, where they established a new village, New Karki. Barkhudarli is a former Azerbaijani enclave in the north of Armenia. Currently, this enclave covers an area of over 20 square kilometers. It is populated exclusively by Armenians, whereas the Azerbaijani, partly by their own will but mostly under pressure, left the enclave and now live in the home country. Not far from Buhardarli, there were another 2 miniature unpopulated Armenian enclaves. Still further to the north, there is another former Azerbaijani enclave, Uskipara. This village was almost completely devastated during the war, and only the foundations of destroyed houses remain. Well, in my little synopsis that I gave, actually there's a happier ending to this at the moment, with negotiations at an all-time high between the two countries, and I hope that that continues to be the case. Okay, let's do another one. We're going to Syria and Turkey, the intermittent that has yet to find peace. So you've got Turkey here, and this is Syria. Aleppo is just here, look. And the river Euphrates, which eventually will run into Iraq over there. The tomb of Suleiman Shah. Most of the world's enclaves are inhabited, though there are some that are used only for production, mainly agricultural. As well as these, there are some enclaves that have purely historical significance with no other reason for their existence. This is the case with the tomb of Suleiman Shah, a Turkish enclave in Syria. Süleyman Shah was an important figure in Turkish history. He was the godfather of Osman I, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, one of the greatest powers of all time. According to one legend, Süleyman Shah drowned in the Euphrates River, though historians have not confirmed this. There is a possibility that a Süleyman Shah did drown in the Euphrates, though it was not the one who was grandfather to Osman I, but the founder of another Turkish state that was later integrated into the Ottoman Empire. Nevertheless, it is generally accepted that the tomb of Süleyman Shah was on a fortified hill on the bank of the Euphrates, about 100 kilometers south of the present-day Turkish-Syrian border. The border between Turkey and Syria, a former French colony, was established by a peace treaty between Turkey and France in 1921. This agreement stipulated that the land upon which the tomb of Süleyman Shah stood, Qal'at at-Jabar Hill, with an area of less than 1 hectare, should remain Turkish, with a small Turkish guard of honour. However, as if the existence of such an enclave was not unusual enough, the creation of the large artificial Lake Assad on the Euphrates River led to yet another strange situation. Due to the risk of the tomb being flooded, Turkey and Syria agreed to relocate the enclave 70 kilometers upstream, to just 35 kilometers from the Turkish-Syrian border. Who knows why they did not decide to move the enclave to the border, so that it could be unified with the rest of Turkey. Anyway, until the beginning of 2015, and the escalation of the conflict in Syria, the tomb was located on a small peninsula beside the Euphrates. Then, because of the risk of the fighters of the Islamic State, or ISIS, attacking that Turkish island in Syria, the Guard of Honor was initially reinforced with additional Turkish special forces, accompanied by the threat from Turkey that it would defend its entire territory with its mighty army, including the tomb of Süleyman Shah. A few months later, Turkey changed its strategy. In a rapid military action, the body of Süleyman Shah was transferred again. The buildings on the peninsula were destroyed, so they would not fall into the hands of ISIS, and a new tomb was built in the north of Syria, between the Euphrates and the city of Kobane, only 200 meters from the Turkish-Syrian border. Turkish authorities have repeatedly stressed that the tomb has only been temporarily relocated, and that it will be returned to its previous location once the situation in Syria stabilizes. However, according to some statements by Syrian officials, that country does not recognize Turkey's right to independently decide on the location of the mausoleum and its exclave in Syria, and that moving the tomb in 2015 is a violation of the 1921 Treaty of Ankara on the Turkish-Syrian border. Okay, for our last one, I think we'll pop to North America to talk about Saint-Pierre and Miquelon between Canada and France. So this took me a second to recognize, but the blue is the land and the water is in white, which is confusing. Yeah, Atlantic Ocean. So Nova Scotia is the part in blue here. Quebec. This is all Canada. Newfoundland on the peninsula there. But just here, 1, 2, 3 islands. That is France. We talked about this in a video I've done previously. This is the area of Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, which is part of France. But for some reason there's a massive line. Let's learn about this, shall we? The enclave that is nearly 4,000 miles from its French homeland. Although most of the world enclaves are wedged in somewhere between the land borders of their neighbouring countries, some enclaves are different. One such enclave is Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. Saint-Pierre and Miquelon is a small archipelago consisting of 3 main islands, Saint-Pierre, Miquelon and Langlade. and a large number of smaller islands. As Miquelon and Langlade are connected by narrow sandbar, they are now considered to form a single island. So the name Miquelon is commonly used for both islands, shaped together as a number 8. The small archipelago is located 25 kilometers south of the Canadian island of Newfoundland. But politically and culturally, it belongs to France, 3,800 kilometers away. Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, as the French Overseas Territorial Collectivity, is an integral part of the French Republic and the European Union. The euro is used as a means of payment, though often, because of its location, both the Canadian and US dollars are also accepted. The archipelago, with a total area of about 240 square kilometers, has 6,000 inhabitants who speak French. Interestingly, this French is more similar to the language spoken in France than in the nearby Canadian Quebec. The main economic activities are fishing, although declining, and tourism, as the islands are easily accessible to visitors from Canada. In recent years, there has been some rising optimism that oil might be found in the surrounding waters, which could offer a significant boost to the archipelago's ailing economy. What makes these islands a kind of enclave is the so-called Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, of Canada, which fully surrounds Saint-Pierre-Miquelon. It was precisely on this issue that Canada and France had a long-running dispute in an international court, which ruled to assign the French archipelago a very unusually shaped EEZ. Its boundaries resemble what many call the key. Explains that a little bit. So that French ships from international waters could reach the islands through a narrow corridor, nearly 200 kilometers long and only 10 kilometers wide. However, Canada later exercised its right under international regulations to further extend its EEZ, so the French Key became a kind of maritime exclave of France in Canadian waters. Oh my god, so weird. The possibility that significant oil reserves could be found in those waters is not likely to accelerate or facilitate the final defining of a compromise border between Canada and Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, the last remnant of the once powerful colony of Nouvelle-France, or New France. Note, an exclusive economic zone is an area of coastal water and seabed within a specified distance of a country's coastline, to which the country claims exclusive rights for exploitation of the sea's biological and mineral resources, fish, oil, and the like, including energy production from water and wind. That is awesome. Okay, very interesting. I hope you also found it interesting. If you did, click like. Leave me a comment on any of the things that I mentioned today. And do subscribe if you are new to the channel. And definitely get this book. I'm not being paid to say that, I just love it. It's super, super cool. The Atlas of Unusual Borders. I found it on Amazon. It's only 20 quid or something. And it's by Zoran Nikolic. Oh yeah, $14.99. Actually cheaper than I thought. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your comments and your support with the channel. Hope you have had a lovely year so far. Whenever you're watching this, I created it in January. And take care. I think it's snowing outside, so I'm gonna go play. You go to sleep.